So one of the things that I have to do fairly often is watch real-time data sources, for instance, like a log file on a server. And what I'm going to do here is talk about how to use a generator function to monitor that data in Python. To start this off, one of the ways that I often will watch a log file on, for instance, a web server or something like that is to use the Unix tail -f command. Many people have seen this before, but what you can do is point it at maybe a log file and then watch as data is being written to it. What I've got here is actually I have a log file that is watching stock market data. So you'll slowly see it being updated in the bottom there. You sort of see price updates and information being written. So what I'm going to do is talk about how to write Python code that watches this log file. And so I'm going to make a file follow.py. And what we're going to do is watch a log file, stocks in this case here. And here's how I'm going to do this. There's a few things about files that might be a little bit unusual here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a file. Okay, I'll open up this stocklog.csv file for reading, and then I'm going to seek to the end of the file. This is maybe the unusual part. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to the end of the file, and then I'm going to write a loop where I just constantly try to read lines at the end of the file. Okay, so we're going to read a new line of data, and then if there's nothing there, like we don't get any data, what I'm going to do is essentially sleep briefly and then try again. This is kind of like a retry sort of thing. I'm going to write a file that kind of reads at the end of the file, does a retry, and then maybe just to start, I'll print out the line here. Okay, so let's print out the line. Actually, I'll put a got line so we can see that. I'm going to try to run that and just see whether it looks at all similar to this Unix tail -f that I just did. Let's go ahead and run that for a second. Okay, so I have this program. It's kind of watching the end of the file. If it's working correctly, I should see it start to print lines as they come in here. It might take a second for data to update. So there I got a line that said cat. Okay, so the thing is kind of watching the end of the file. Now, one of the things that you might do is try to do some processing on the data after you've read it. Maybe instead of just printing out the lines, maybe I'll split the data up. Maybe I'll split on a comma. And then maybe I would look at some of the data. I happen to know that like the change in the stock price, I think is in like row 4. So maybe I could watch the file. I could say, well, okay, I'm going to watch the file. And then if like the change in the price is less than 0, maybe I would pull out some additional information like name is equal to row 0. The price is equal to row 1. Print, let's print some of these things formatted out maybe. Okay. So what I've got here is I've kind of taken this program and maybe extended it a little bit more. What I've got is I'm watching a file, but then I'm watching the file for events, basically negative like change in price. I'm trying to figure out what stocks are falling in price. Let's run it just to kind of see if it's going to work here. So if it's working, what it should do is it should start printing out a table showing me stocks that are down in price. Okay, so it's telling me Microsoft is down, a few others are down, and so forth. Again, think about watching maybe like a web server log and you're looking for anomalous events or something like that. This kind of code, this is a perfect place to use something like a generator function. Turns out that this act of following the file is something that I could package up into a function. Like I could say follow some file name, and I could take this whole first part of the code and sort of package it up into one of these generators. I could say, okay, well, the way that you follow a file is you open it, you do this little while loop, and then when you get a line, you emit it with the yield statement. Okay, so we're going to emit basically a line doing that. This code down at the bottom can be recast as a for loop. I can say for line and follow, stocklog.csv, and the code will actually work exactly the same as it's working now. Let's run it and see if it does that. So what is happening now is I've got this one little function that's just sitting there constantly monitoring the file, and then it's using yield to kind of spit out lines. And then this code down below is sort of watching that feed, if you will, and looking for events to take place, these negative stock change events. Very kind of interesting, clever thing that has taken place there. One of the things that's really kind of amazing about this is that this generator function that I wrote here is extremely general purpose. I could use that to watch a web server log. I could use it to watch stocks. There's nothing about this function that has anything whatsoever to do with the contents of the data. It's just reading lines off. That is a very powerful idea that I could take iteration and just package it up into a little self-contained unit like that. So that's one of the powers of generators, is being able to do that. The code down here at the bottom, in some sense, is also more powerful than it was before. This for line in follow is actually a more general idea of just doing a for loop. There's nothing about this code that has anything to do with following a file. For instance, if I didn't want to follow the file, maybe I could just open the file. And that code at the bottom would work fine. If I were to do that, what it would do is sort of like a quick post-processing thing. Like if I run it, it would just process the entire file and then quit. It doesn't even have to pull anything from a file. I mean, you could get the lines from somewhere else. Maybe you opened up a file, like you said, open up, data stocklog.csv, and then you said lines is equal to f read lines, and then you did a for loop on lines. That would work just fine as well. The whole idea is that this for loop at the bottom doesn't really care what the thing is that you're iterating on. There's a lot of flexibility there. So this is one of the big ideas on generators is, you can package up iteration into little functions. And if you're using iteration, you actually get a lot of power for how things kind of fit together and how you can do data processing in your program.